Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode with The Dope, a business magazine in the field of travel and hospitality, driving sustainability as a prime focus so that they can bring about a change in the way we sell and we promote travel. Today, we have with us the utterly charming Ali with us from an organization called Sea Going Green. Very curious and a wonderfully evocative name. She is into monitoring sustainability, especially where tourism around marine ecosystems are concerned. Definitely like to know, to begin with, how did you come about this? It almost seems like a little metaphor, sea going green. How did you come about that name?
Yeah, absolutely. So it came from a brainstorming session. I mean, when we first founded the company, we were really fixated on what's our vision going to be, what's our mission, what do we really want to get 10 years down the line. So we really solidified the mission to be to alleviate the negative impact of tourism on the marine environment specifically. So we knew we wanted to work with the marine environment, something with sea, something with ocean. And back in 2017, when we founded, there was a lot of the word eco going around, but it didn't have the right connotation for us. We really wanted to focus on high luxury kind of tourism. So eco didn't really seem to go with it. So then we literally did like a word cloud and putting all the words together, playing with it, and we landed on Sea Going Green. And it kind of like instantly made a lot of sense because ultimately we want to make the sea go green. So that's kind of how it came together.
Yeah, that's very interesting because whenever you, as a kid, and when you see kids painting, whenever they put the sea, it's always blue in color. So
Mm-hmm.
it is really metaphorical, right? And so
Absolutely.
yeah, so and it just gives the, I mean, y'all did a great job with this. With this cloud work, this cloud wording. I know what they do when everybody puts their thoughts in, and it's by
Mm-hmm.
ticks and checks, like checks and ticks, you kind of come up with a word. So
Exactly.
so yes, the word cloud really worked very well. It's just a great combination of words. So
Thank
you
you.
and you are a marine biologist, right? I mean, years into studying science, and from there onwards to becoming, this is literally entrepreneurship, right? You really got into social entrepreneurship. And how did that come about?
Yeah, so my journey, I think when I tell the story, it makes a lot of sense, but going through it, I can tell you it never really made sense to me. They always say hindsight is 2020, so I'm definitely experiencing a lot of that. I think my journey really started so I was born in Serbia, and my dad's Croatian, and then they're both air traffic controllers. So travel was always part of our lives from day one, basically. But we did move to Canada when I was one. So really learning about international experiences, really becoming kind of an international citizen. But we really made sure to travel back to Serbia and Croatia every summer because all of our family was still there. So I had really strong roots there. And particularly Croatia, I think, is where I completely fell in love with the sea. It has such beautiful marine life and everything. So I really loved going there. But at the same time, Croatia started getting popular in the tourism industry as I was growing up. And it was really booming. I mean, now it's one of the hottest destinations you can visit. And it was really nice to see the local communities really happy about that. Obviously, from an economic point of view, they can work for a few months and then live for the rest of the year off that. But at the same time, you can hear them complaining about needing to clean up after tourists, needing to rebuild, and then you can also see the water quality going down. So that was definitely something that I was really aware of from a young age, looking at this balance between communities and the local environment, especially the marine environment. How can they actually coexist together? I then went on to study marine biology because I was completely passionate about this topic and really, really wanted to go through it. And then I moved to 6 countries before the age of 21. I was also completely obsessed with travel. I worked in travel companies throughout all my studies with destination management. And I was kind of always looking for this way to tie it together. And then I think when living in Singapore, I traveled a lot through Southeast Asia, and that's really where I saw tourism at a completely different scale than I've ever seen it. I mean, just the sheer numbers of people there, but also the impact on pollution, for example, plastic pollution and local communities. And that's really where I saw this disbalance between communities and the tourism industry booming. Yeah, so I really wanted to see how can I really use my marine knowledge to help the marine tourism sector to manage their impacts on the marine environment. So the marine environment is something that I know really well from an academic point of view, and I know the tourism industry as a business industry. So Seagoing Green is kind of how I put it all together, and using my tourism context to kind of take it all in.
To take it all in, yeah. So sea growing, like I was telling you, so when you actually try and paint the sea, it's always a blue sea. So what's the idea? Sea going green. What could be your narrative for the name of your company, for instance?
Absolutely. So I think for us, green really means eco, so eco-friendly, making something with no negative impact on the environment. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to take all of the sustainability practices towards the marine environment.
Yeah, fantastic. And so, just for a lay person, I mean, not from a say a scientific or a biologist point of view, what are the challenges that any marine environment that is close to a tourism hub would face?
Yeah, so there are many, obviously, but definitely some that I want to point out is also the physical impact. You know, you think of consumers and tourists just going into the seas, snorkeling, diving, touching marine life, touching corals, interacting with marine life, changing their feeding habits and all of these kinds of things. So those are definitely some anthropogenic effects that are really negative. But also if we're looking at it from a carbon emission point of view, so if you think of all the flights that we're taking everywhere, all the transport we're taking everywhere, those carbon emissions lead to carbon dioxide actually getting absorbed by the ocean, leading to ocean acidification, which is bad for the coral reefs and the marine life. So it all kind of ties together. As well as all the products that we're using. If you're thinking of sunscreens, it's really important to really try to use reef-safe sunscreens that are safe for the oceans. But then also about the kinds of tourism products that you're choosing. So if we're looking at like seaside building and things like that, all those hotels are usually needing to rip up mangroves actually from the sand so that hotels can go there. But that's of course bad for the land, which leads to erosion, which is bad for anything that's built on it, but also the erosion. The actual materials that go back into the sea is again bad for marine life. So those are, I think, some really important negative impacts.
Important. And in the last few years, I mean, the last 10, 20, 25 years from the time when, beach tourism, I mean, seaside tourism has increased. What would you think in terms of the physical, in terms of physical things being, in terms of physical impacts, what would you know as, and physical impacts that we used to see at one point in time as sights, as amazing sights to see? What would those impacts that are no longer what they used to be before?
Absolutely. So I think a really big one is coral reefs. I mean, right now it's estimated that 75% to 80% of the world's coral reefs are actually going to disappear by 2050. But if we're looking at more recent numbers, it's actually closer to 90%. So I think this is a really, really big issue that we're definitely, it's been happening a lot faster in the past few decades. Before, coral bleaching would take decades, and now we're seeing those kinds of changes happen within months. So I think things like that is definitely something that we're seeing faster and faster, unfortunately.
Yes, so which means the great coral reef isn't great anymore.
No, definitely not. I mean, but also when you think about it, this has been happening for quite a few decades. I know that in Australia, back in the 80s, that they had this this tourism product called Walk on the Reef, and they would literally take tourists out for a tour to walk on the coral reef. So you can really think that, yeah, these kinds of negative impacts have really started decades ago.
decades ago, and that have slowly eroded the coral reef. They actually break up, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the little bits and pieces that you see on that keep getting washed onto the seashore, you think that they are parts of the broken coral reefs, not organically broken. They've been broken due to some tourist activity or somebody going in there and loosening them out or something like that. Is that how it goes?
It's a mix of both, actually, because also when there's more erosion and less breakwater, the coral reefs are also not protected then, so they also naturally break down that way.
Breakdown, yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned bleaching, right? The coral reef. So how does how does that happen? I remember seeing rows and rows of white color coral, while when they show it up on TV, they are these colored ones, right? And also, if you know, when there's this gem called coral. So is that from the sea? Is that the color of coral, or it's a particular kind of coral?
I think it's a particular kind of coral.
Coral, yeah, and that also must be contributing to the to the decimation of the corals in the world, of the marine life.
Absolutely.
And what is bleaching of the coral reefs?
Yeah, so coral reef bleaching basically happens from ocean acidification, and ocean acidification happens from carbon emissions that are basically producing more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and getting absorbed back into the oceans, and that's what leads to coral bleaching.
Oh, wow.
And it's really hard to take a bleached coral back to life.
Bleached coral means the organism in it is dead. I mean, it's no longer,
Basically.
Basically, yeah. And what are there countries who are actually working towards, who are actually laying out, from a government perspective, are there countries who are putting out strict protocols and regulations against some of these things, also against building resorts close to the ocean, to the beaches? Are they do you have an example
Absolutely.
of countries that are doing this? Yeah.
Definitely, yes. Yeah, there's a lot of countries around the world that they're seeing the negative impacts in this. And I always like to say that a destination ultimately loses its profitability when it loses its beauty. So it's also in the destination's best interest to conserve the environment that they're having. Some examples that I can think off the top of my head, for example, is Maya Beach in Thailand. It's a really popular beach that got really popular with the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, The Beach. I don't know if you're aware of it, but everyone flocked there to get the picture. And I mean, it's also very close to where James Bond was filmed and things like this. So a lot of tourists flocked there. But what that meant also was everyone was going in with sunscreens, touching all the corals, all the marine life, and then all of a sudden everything was gone. I was lucky enough to visit this in 2013 actually, but really all I can remember is a crowded beach and like a thick layer of sunscreen in the ocean. And then now they've actually closed that beach down completely. There's no tourists allowed. And I spoke with someone who's actually in charge of this, and they were talking that when they do open the beach again, that now no one can actually physically walk on the actual beach or swim. They've done like a 300-meter perimeter, I believe. So they can actually give time for the marine life to come back.
Wonderful. So interesting. When you said the sunscreens, I thought maybe some product of the sea is used for sunscreen. You actually mean sunscreen leaving residues inside the ocean, right? And that harming the living organisms. Oh, yeah. I mean, that is one news for me. Also, I wanted to check with you. They talk about shark caging. I mean, I'm completely against wild animal, the petting and handling wild animals. Of course, that's on the shore, but there is a lot of there's a lot of activities, tourism activities like shark caging, and of course manta rays, swimming with manta rays and things like that. So are those permissible, or are they a no too?
Yeah, I definitely have the same views as I do for land animals. I definitely don't believe that we should be interacting in this kind of way. It's just not natural. And then, I mean, especially for manta ray feeding and things like that. I know that's really popular in the Caribbean. But then you completely mess up their whole feeding cycle. If they're used to, one cove always having food there, and then all of a sudden there's no tourists, for example, now during COVID, they completely forget how to hunt and things like this because they don't have that natural instinct anymore. So I definitely have the same views as I do with wildlife on land.
Fishing, overfishing, and all that also comes under, under the purview of keeping the ocean ecosystems thriving, right? So,
Absolutely.
of course, whenever you are by a coastal, by the coast, that you will head straight for seafood is, it just seems to go hand in hand. So I know that I was in South Africa, and some of the restaurants actually put out a little poster where it clearly tells you which are the fish and things that you shouldn't be eating, because they are, there's a green, orange, and red, right? So they keep these three dots, which means orange is like they are almost in the middle, getting there, and red, of course, is that they are critically endangered. So how do you what do you think about this? Of course, it is not only the tourism industry, it's also the fishing industry that's kind of completely overfishing our oceans, right? So does that come under the purview when you're doing as a part of the tourism, when you're actually creating sustainable protocols for tourism?
Absolutely. I mean, we're always trying to look at our tourism clients also not feeding into the overfishing and not having those kinds of things on their menus, for example. But I really like the green, yellow, and red markers. I mean, I wish more places had systems like this. I know, for example, in the Dutch Caribbean, where we're quite active as well, they have a fish called the lionfish, which is actually an invasive species that is really bad for marine environment there because it basically has no natural predator. So humans are the natural predators. They're actually really trying to get people out there to hunt them. And then a lot of local restaurants are now learning how to actually make dishes with that. So tourists and locals and everybody can enjoy it without actually feeding into the overfishing.
Okay, that's a good midway. I mean, keeping both parties happy. So under your company, under Seagoing Green, can you tell us exactly what you all do and what are the protocols that? And I saw a long list of things that you participated in, including TEDx. So, but what are the profiles of what you do under Seagoing Green?
Absolutely. So when we started, we really knew that we wanted to build sustainability strategies. But coming from an academic view, I really needed some sort of numbers to base these strategies on. I really believe that data is how we can actually build strategies that you can track. So I decided to start a carbon footprinting software, basically specialized for the marine tourism products, so all the clients that we work with. So we're really specializing in river cruises, in yachting companies, bigger cruise companies, but also now whole islands and more destinations. So we do a carbon footprint assessment for them, where we can actually see where their biggest impact is on the marine environment. Be it the fuel that they're using, be it the food and drink that they're consuming, be it the materials that they're actually using for the tourism product. And then we can actually build a strategy for them. So to try to get them carbon neutral, either in 2, 5, 10 years time. It's always kind of different with each client, of course. And then in between, we also provide environmental training. So how can they actually explain this to their staff, but also to their end consumer? This includes some communication. How do you actually talk about sustainability? There's a lot of greenwashing going out there. So we're really trying to keep our clients away from that and really give them the tools that they can effectively communicate their sustainability strategy. And of course, I do this also by doing some expert talks and things like that, just to try to get the message out there.
Great. And do travel companies, cruise companies? I mean, I know cruising is a big threat to the marine environment, right? And there are a lot of lobbies against ocean cruising, but river cruising is still a little bit, they kind of look at river cruising in a slightly better light. But obviously, river cruising also has its challenges, right? So, what could the challenges be where river cruising is concerned?
I think from what we've seen, the biggest impact is fuel, usually, the kind of fuels that these river cruises use.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not the newest boats, for example, and things like that. So they use a little bit of a dirtier fuel. And then, of course, also it depends on the infrastructure that they're operating in. River cruises usually go from city to city, for example. But if those cities' ports don't have actual city hubs for them to plug into, then they have to run on generator. And that's also a lot of fuel that's being used.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's really the biggest one that we're seeing, but also single-use plastics. I mean, it's any kind of issues that you would see in a hotel, we're seeing the same thing
Same
in
thing
river
in
cruises
river
as well.
cruises. Yeah. So, does seagoing green also? I mean, you do kind of measure their carbon sustainability, but do you also create solutions for them? Do you?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So then we make these strategies for how to actually get them carbon neutral. And then
Okay.
usually they need to switch either their services or what kind of providers they're using. So
Mm.
we have this really great network of over 25 industry partnerships that we connect them to. So if they need cleaner fuels, biofuels, if they need to get to solar, we have partners for that. If they need reef safe sunscreens, we have partners for that, or
Fantastic.
reusable water bottles, all that kind of thing. We definitely try to connect them with the best of the best in the industry.
Fantastic. I mean, great work, great work. And do you also give them certifications, having provided solutions? Do you also work in the certification by providing them like a stamp or certification that they're doing X, Y, Z correctly and within keeping with the norms for ocean sustainability?
Yeah, so we have created an internal certification that we like to work with our clients, but we've also partnered with some external certification companies because there are so many out there in the tourism industry. I definitely didn't
Absolutely.
want to make yet another one. So we're communicating with GSDC, for example, and Oceanic Global in the States, and kind of it's up to the client really what kind of certification they want, depending on what region they're operating in, of course, because some certification programs also come with tax benefits and things like that. So we're not linked to just one. We kind of try to find the best one that they want.
Best when they want, yeah. And where talking about certifications, so where in case of say pollution and things like that on land, they kind of say, okay, we'll go and we'll go and plant trees somewhere for you, the offsetting, the carbon offsetting thing. So in case of the ocean issues where the ocean operations or river operations are concerned, what could be, is it carbon neutral or is it carbon offsetting?
Yeah, it's a little bit of mix of both. I think it's unrealistic to expect our clients to become carbon neutral right away.
Neutral.
These kinds of changes
Yeah.
definitely take a long time, but we also do recommend some offsetting programs for them in the meantime while they're on their journey to carbon neutrality. We definitely don't think it's the only solution because we
Absolutely.
definitely want their operations to go lower long term. So we do have some partners for offsetting, including some seagrass companies, for example, who plant seagrass, others that actually regenerate a certain land area, and also some that plant trees as well.
Fantastic. So, in the case of foresting on the land, monocultures are actually a strict no-no. So you might be having the same kind of issues with oceans, where
Mm-hmm.
kind of planting seagrass all over the place, or kind of fish seeding in a particular area, just as a case scale, just to talk about a case where you're trying to offset carbon. So does that really work? Is that all right? Is that okay?
Responsible way, of course. The companies that we work with, though, are usually either replanting seagrass that was once there, especially, for
Okay.
example, in the Caribbean. A lot of the seagrass and mangroves have either been ripped up because of tourism activities or because of hurricanes and natural disasters. So we're actually usually replanting where they've already been.
Okay, yeah, fantastic. That's a great point. Yes, and I mean, the New Year's coming up, right? And let's take some topical question, which is related to India. You haven't been to India or the subcontinent around here, have you been?
Unfortunately, not yet, but it is number one on my list.
You must come because we have some. I mean, we have a very, very large, you see, it's a peninsula, right? India is a peninsula, and we have a very, uh, we have a very long coastal line, both on the Arabian Sea on one side, and we have the Bay of Bengal on one side, and then the Indian Ocean also in some parts. And then, of course, we have a lot of islands that become a part of the that are a part of the Indian subcontinent. So, currently, I don't know if you know, from India, you can only go to Maldives, and I see on all these social media and on WhatsApp groups, everybody's like, creating, and everybody's putting out these flyers about, let's go to Maldives, and that worries me, right? So obviously there are going to be more numbers than, so our carrying capacities to certain beach fronts and oceans are a part of what you do?
Absolutely. Carrying capacity is something that we always talk about with island communities. I mean, I think the example of Boracay, for example, in the Philippines is a really perfect example of how it can go wrong. It was definitely marketed as a destination. It was named one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. And then it turned into this complete disaster.
Bizarre,
they were just pushing more and more people there. And then at some point, the local sewage system couldn't handle anymore because it wasn't built for this carrying capacity. All of the policies didn't respect the carrying capacity at all. So I think when they actually researched about 100 and something local establishments, only 20% of them were actually linked up to the local sewage system. So you can just imagine all of that extra sewage was just directly going into the sea,
ocean,
which is a complete disaster. And they had to actually close the whole island to any visitors and move back any employees that moved there for their tourism jobs. So this was a huge monetary loss and economic loss. And now they've reopened, but definitely to a much smaller kind of clientele. Before they were kind of like a backpacking destination, and now they're definitely more quiet, less partying, definitely more higher end.
And and more mindful of the impacts.
Absolutely, because they actually saw what could happen if they don't respect the carrying capacity.
Yeah, considering that for New Year's in India, even in India, the beach, especially for people in the north where we have a proper winter, going to a beach destination is primary. I mean, is fun time over New Year is to be by the beach, right? So, I mean, for people listening in, would you want to give some tips on what it is to what they should be looking out for? And we have Goa on the western coast. Of course, we have the entire western coast along Kerala, which is again another beautiful part of the country. We also have backwaters in Kerala where, there are houseboats and things like that. And then, of course, we have the eastern coast, which is not as popular because the sea is quite rough over there, but still there are some lovely beaches. And finally, of course, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which are again very, very, very fragile ecosystems. So, are there some? Would you want to advise travelers so that they know what to do? They can be very careful about when they're out there on a vacation. They know what they shouldn't be doing, especially.
Absolutely. I mean, I think even before the vacation, really thinking about the destination you're picking, we're way too far along in our sustainability journey that these kind of destinations don't have sustainability policies. So really research that, see what they're actually doing for that local space, but also picking hospitality providers. So look at the hotels that you're choosing, the Airbnbs you're choosing, or whatever it might be. See what they're actually doing for sustainability. Are they working with the local community? Do they have any sustainability policies? I think you can really start your journey there. But then, of course, when you're actually there, what you can do is, as I mentioned a few times now, wearing reef-safe sunscreens. I think that's definitely a really big point. Not littering, of course, joining a local cleanup, trying to find maybe a local NGO or something like that, a cleanup group that's really active. Also getting educated about the marine environment you're visiting. Are there any endangered species, maybe endangered species you shouldn't be eating, these kinds of things. but also, again, being careful when you're snorkeling and diving, not interacting with the marine life enough, just kind of being a visitor, and also trying to leave the beach as you found it. I think that's definitely the biggest
Absolutely
point.
pristine and clean. Yeah, one question on snorkeling and diving. So is that the threat is only from the sunscreens, or also the proximity that people tend to, the joy of seeing, fish and reefs and everything come at you. So is that also a consideration when you're looking at undersea experiences?
Absolutely, definitely. I think just really understanding that you're a visitor in the sea and trying not to interact with the marine life as much as possible. I think that's definitely the best thing. I mean, unfortunately, I saw it so many times, but I remember last time in the Dutch Caribbean, someone actually was telling me that they were snorkeling and they saw someone dive after a turtle and start shaking the turtle and things like that. So that kind of behavior is a big no-no. If fish come up to you, of course, you can let it happen, but, don't try to grab it, touch it, feed it. These kinds of things is really what changes their behavior.
Is there a blog you write, Ali, that people can check into? You want to give the, you want to talk about the blog and, where people can find your writing. I know on the sustainability project, there was an interview there was an interview that you gave the sustainability project. I know that one. And any blog sites you want people to visit to read about your views and action on marine environment sustainability?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are a business to business consulting company. So we really work with businesses, but we wanted to start our blog on our website. Actually, that is for anybody. It can be businesses, but it can also just be consumers. So you can just go to seagoinggreen.org/blog and you can read all of our blogs there. I sometimes write, so does my team. And we also invite a lot of amazing guest lecturers and writers to write about all the hottest marine conservation topics.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ali. That was really enlightening, and I've learned quite a bit. And I did zoology. I did my undergrad in zoology, and I grew up on the eastern coast, and I did support a couple of marine, a couple of NGOs that used to work in the marine environment. But that was a long time ago, and it is great to be listening to what you're saying. And a lot of this is also new age. Sunscreen. We never heard of sunscreen when we were young. We just put coconut oil on our faces when we went out, just to protect us from the sun, right? So is that okay? I mean, organic oil, is that okay, or is it still a...
Yeah, I think there needs to be more studies with how organic oils actually interact with the marine environment. From now, there's just been a lot of studies on the actual chemical compounds that's in sunscreen. So that's definitely more of the threat.
Yeah. So coconut oil is okay, I guess, for now.
I hope so. Yeah, for now.
Yes. No, that's just amazing, Ali. And it is so good to see you so passionate about your work. And you did a great job. I mean, all of it came out as something that obviously it is so close to your heart that you just spoke about each and every issue that faces the oceanic and the river environment today, because you've been reading about it, working with people, and I think that's really amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. It's the New Year's coming up. I hope you take all the tips that Ali has given you here. Please like this episode, share generously, because in sharing and in putting out these ideas and putting out the issues and challenges that the environment faces today, if it is shared and what each one of us can do to help alleviate these challenges will go a long way in helping us preserve the world for the next generation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ali.